Let's go with Peter, who's calling from Novi, Michigan on the Republican line. Peter, good morning.
Good morning. That's Novi, Michigan, by the way, not
Novi,
Novi.
Michigan. Okay, gotcha. Go ahead with your question.
Um, I've called in a few times in the past, usually as an independent. I'm leaning more towards I'm a Republican now by the way the world's going and by the way everyone is. I've been smoking weed for 40 years. My friends, even longer than that. And let me tell you, the weed we smoked 40 years ago was 20 times as good as you can get.
Oh, okay. One of the things that you talked about in one of your articles is the increased potency.
Hi everybody, my name's Mike. This is my YouTube page, Mox News. Thanks very much for tuning in. Okay, so I thought that I should chime in on this since this is one of my areas of expertise. I just want to say that, the guy who says that marijuana, he's been smoking weed for 40 years. I've been smoking weed for 40 years. And I can tell you that when I first started smoking weed, I started with the best weed on the planet. It was, I told you guys I was smoking purple sesame, and I told you about the first time I smoked weed. You can look it up. The first time I smoked weed. It's on the page. But it was purple sesame, and I told you guys about that. But I lived in this little town on the California coast, and we used to get like 90% of the weed that came in on the coast came into that place. So we always had the primo, and I was smoking this unbelievable Humboldt in the 1980s. We used to get this Colombian gold that would be like the most laughy stuff you ever had. I mean, you just like I'm like laughing uncontrollably. This is in 1979, not 1980. I had tie sticks. When I was 16, I had a tie stick the size of a quarter, and oh man, I could only take like 2 or 3 puffs off a joint of that. I was like, okay, I'm good. Um, the weed now is good, but it's like something's missing from it almost. It's good. I really have trouble finding stuff that I really like. I didn't have that issue when I was in high school, believe it or not. But also I wanted to say is that these guys frame this like the legislatures are, the state legislatures are the ones that are legalizing marijuana. The state legislatures are not the ones. They're the ones writing the laws that say that it's legal, but it's the people that are demanding that it be legalized. They're going to the polls and voting, demanding that it be legalized, that this bullshit war on cannabis be stopped now. It's not the state legislatures desperate for money. It's the people saying, get the police state out of my fucking neighborhood. My neighborhood is a nice place. We don't need the police state messing with anyone over a flower. Okay, number 3, one thing else I wanted to say was that this guy claims to be Christian, and he keeps talking about how the Bible, talks about sobriety. The Bible, right at the beginning of the Bible, it says, I give unto man. This is God speaking. It says, I give unto man all seed-bearing plants to use as meat, which means daily consumption. All seed-bearing plants to use as meat. There is no more seed-bearing plant on this planet than cannabis. Trust me on this. Anyone who's ever grown it and didn't pay real close attention knows this to be a fact. Okay. So this claim of, oh, we have to look at it from the Christian level, and oh, God, everything created by God on the planet. Yeah, and it was created to make a paradise for you. And these people who don't trust you, the people who say, oh, I don't trust my neighbors with a flower, because the nanny state needs to babysit them every second of the day, and then want to claim that they're small government conservatives are complete morons. Okay? It's the people want this. Stop baby stepping the people's freedom. They want it. They want it now. Give it to them in the land of the free. And in fact, we need to end the drug war, because the drug war, the Just Say No drug war, has brought us an epidemic of, of, of opioid abuse. Okay? There's people dying on the streets every single day across every single community in America because of the drug war. Okay, and all you people who are like cop suckers, you know, who can't wait to be like on the police side for everything. Oh, we love our police. Don't we love our police? And the police, I don't hate police. I grew up with cops. I understand cops. The police, the people who want to say, oh, we love our police, you know, and the cops who say, oh, we just want to get home to our families at nights. Then legalize all drugs. End this drug war. End the drug war. Save a cop's life. Hey, how's that for a fair trade, huh? And the drug war, and the drug cartels. The drug cartels can't sell their illegal drugs because you just go to the corner store pharmacy and get them there. They're not illegal anymore. And the drug war, and all this massive amount of money to the violent gangs. Okay, how hard is this to see? How hard is this to understand? It needs to stop now. Okay, I'm gonna let you go watch this show. It's a half-hour call-in show from C-SPAN's Washington Journal. It's a very good show. I love posting it. It takes a great deal of effort. There's over 8,500 videos on this Mox News YouTube page. There's multiple Mox News YouTube pages. On this one, there's over 8,500 videos. It takes a great deal of time and effort to make that happen. Mox News survives solely on tips and donations from good people like yourself. And I know that you, being the good people that you are, don't use a service over and over again that you know survives on tips and never tip, because that's not how good people are, is it? These are the facts for today. Thanks very much for tuning in. Wednesdays, this war is going to end. Stay cool until that day.
Washington Journal continues.
We're back with our weekly Spotlight on Magazine segment, where today we're going to talk with World Magazine reporter Jim Long about his series on recreational marijuana laws in the United States and about legalization of recreational marijuana laws. Jim, good morning.
Good morning, Jesse. How are you?
I'm good. So what made you decide to look at the pot industry last year?
Well, you know, World Magazine's not afraid to get down and dirty in the streets where people live, and this was a phenomenon we saw in the country that was just taking off, from medical marijuana legalization to recreational or so-called adult use of marijuana. And we thought, you know, we wanted to actually first just kind of take the pulse of the nation on this. How far are we in moving towards national or federal approval of adult and recreational use of marijuana vis-a-vis Canada? And what we kind of concluded as we looked at this is that this is kind of a done deal. The train's kind of left the station on this. We are moving very quickly towards federal approval of adult use of marijuana. So that kind of was the impetus for us doing this series.
So this is what, refer a little bit to what you said. World Magazine is a Christian publication. Did you look at this issue from a Christian point of view? And what was your result?
Yeah, we did. You know, World Magazine, just hence the name World Magazine. We view that you know, God made the world and everything in it, so that includes all of life, all these issues. And so we looked at the political angles, we looked at the big business angles, we looked at the social impact, the criminal justice impact, and so and of course the theological, ethical components of this.
So recreational marijuana is now legal in 10 states. What's the draw for state legislatures to make pot legal in their states?
Yeah, I assume there was no pun with draw there, but I think it's just the the huge cash bonanza that this draws for cash-starved legislatures, those especially with budget deficit, budget woes. For instance, in California, BDF Analytics projected that by the end of this year, the California tax base for the marijuana business, $5.1 billion. That's more than the beer tax base for California. In fact, that same group predicts that Californians will spend more money on buds than they will on suds. So it's just that lure of that tax revenue. And with it up to a 15% tax base, it's hard to turn down that kind of revenue.
So we talked a little bit about this, and you mentioned it. Where do you think federal legislation is going on recreational marijuana? There have been a bunch of bills introduced. Do you see any of them being passed anytime soon?
I don't think anytime soon. There were roughly 40-plus bills passed between 2017 and 18, and prior to that, there were about 39 over about a 14-year period. So we're going to see that continual exponential increase. You know, you just had the farm hemp bill that was passed that allowed kind of federally legalized the hemp bill farming mission. But I think you're going to have a little bit more momentum with having states pass the adult use or recreational use of marijuana. But I think if you're going to prognosticate the future, you've got to look at Canada, which just, you know, they legalized marijuana for adult use recreationally last October. So I think that's going to be kind of your harbinger of where we're going to be as a nation.
Well, let me remind our viewers that they can join this conversation. Democrats, you can call in at 202-748-8000. Republicans, you can call in at 202-748-8001. Independents, we want to hear from you at 202-748-8002. And you can always reach us on Twitter at C-SPAN WJ and Facebook at facebook.com/C-SPAN. Now, Jim, who are the biggest advocates for recreational marijuana out there?
Well, you have, you know, it's interesting. I would say the biggest player would be the Drug Policy Alliance, and that's heavily funded by George Soros, the social activist billionaire, the hedge fund billionaire. They're probably the most influential, and their primary mission is to decriminalize marijuana. So kind of a social activist angle. You have, Sean Parker, the former president of Facebook. He was heavily involved in funding Prop 64 for California. You have the late Peter Allen, the progressive insurance billionaire, CEO. He was a big funder for a lot of the propositions for adult use of marijuana. So you have that group that's funding it. Also, those with a big, trying to get their fingers into the pot pie, so to say, would be big business like big alcohol. You have Molson Coors. They're investing heavily into Canadian operations, cannabis operations, cannabusinesses they're called. You've got Heineken, for instance. They just bought Lagunitas Brewing Company. They kind of make craft beers or micro beers that are all based around a 411 theme, right? 411's the supposed time, or it's the 420 theme, 420, that's the time when people are supposed to light up, you know, after school to smoke marijuana. So they're making beers that are either THC inspired or actually have a THC infused water now, a THC infused water. So you've got big tobacco. They're kind of quietly in the background acquiring domain names that have marijuana references. And so you have big business positioning as well. And then you have so-called ganjapreneurs. These are people who are trying to also invest in marijuana edible companies that have been doing so well in the medical marijuana dispensary business. So, you know, business interests, social activists, et cetera, are some of those trying to get into the market and get into the canopy space early.
Well, I was fascinated by the second part of your series, which was you called Pot in the Bottle, that right. The effect that marijuana was having on the alcohol industry. So why are they interested in this? Some people would say, wouldn't that be competition for the alcohol industry instead of a new area of growth?
Right, that's a good question. And I think early on, the alcohol industry looked at that as competition, and then they saw their beer sales decline. And then there were some studies showing that actually, after marijuana was legalized in so many states, they actually saw a slight uptick in alcohol consumption. And in fact, on a much more tragic note, they're seeing an increase in double intoxication and traffic fatalities. But all that to say, there's indicia, good and bad, that there was an increase in both uses of both intoxicants, which really should raise concerns in terms of the social costs of that. But all that to say, there's add to that actually then the if you can't beat them, join them mentality too. So they realized the momentum, it just wasn't going to go away. So that's why alcohol's, to me at least, appears to be moving into the space and just trying to create their own kind of market. Heineken, again, is a good example. They originally bought the 50% stake in Lagunitas Brewing Company and then the controlling interest in that company. So my guess is what they're going to do is keep that market brand separate, create the THC water, which they've done already, and then see how that does in the market. And then they may roll out their own THC Heineken beer. And by the way, in California, the regulations do not, at this point, they're not going to allow a THC-infused alcoholic beverage. There'll be two separate lines. So you'll have a THC, for instance, infused Heineken beer and an alcohol Heineken beer. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But I think the alcohol market has embraced it as really their friend now and a separate product line that they can build upon and augment.
Let's let our callers join in this conversation. Let's go to John, who's calling from Fairfax, Virginia, on the Democratic line. John, good morning.
Good morning, everybody. I would like to recommend to the Democratic Party that they take this up as a major issue and run on legalizing marijuana, which has proved to be very beneficial tax-wise to the states who have done it, and to stop ruining the lives of people who use it. And I think that's a great opportunity for Democrats to just take over and get it legal, which it should have been a long time ago. My main disappointment with President Obama was that he didn't take it off the Schedule 1, which is stupid. Thank you. Bye.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I guess my response to that would be that the Democratic Party has been moving in that direction, and there's actually some bipartisan support in that area as well. There was a cannabis caucus that was created in 2017 that included Republicans and Democrats. And so, for instance, Senator Cory Gardner, Republican senator from Colorado, and then he and actually Elizabeth Warren, they both created what was called the States Act that they proposed, and they actually got a nodding approval from President Trump. It hasn't passed yet, but what that is attempting to do is using 10th Amendment rationales to defer to the states on the issue of marijuana usage, state laws on marijuana and recreational approval of the use of the drug, medical use of the drug, and basically essentially remove the federal prohibition against marijuana law. So there's strong movement, and it's not just amongst the Democratic Party, but even within Republican circles, to legalize marijuana and end the federal prohibition on it. So that trend is on its way.
Let's go to Basil, who's calling from North Olmsted, Ohio, on the Republican line. Basil, how are you this morning?
I'm fine. Thank you for taking the call. I'd like to make an analogy of things that have changed in America. When the Roe v. Wade thing passed, it was early abortions were okay. New York just passed a law where you can kill a child just before birth. We can take the same thing with when the gays came out of the closet. Now we have men marrying men, women marrying women. We can go on and on with these different things that have reached the level of absurdity in where we go when things are accepted by the public. If the public is willing to accept the decadence that the Democratic Party has been introducing to America since they have now become Socialist Party, then what are we to expect with what's going on in the future When you plant certain seeds or release abhorrent behavior in society, this is what we get at the end result. So we'll all be a pot-smoking nation that likes to commit the murder of babies, that likes to marry each other no matter what the sex is. So it is society that has to wake up. No matter what we try to mandate by law, if society is willing to accept decadence, then we will have a decadent country. And I hope the American public wakes up to the difference between propriety and decadence. And I thank you for your time, and I hope my observation wakes some people up. Thank you.
Yeah, one point I want to respond to that. You know, the Bible encourages sober-mindedness, and Christians. I think the closest analogy we have in Scripture to relate to this topic is the issue of alcohol and drunkenness and those matters, and that's where you get your strongest analogy to argue on the ethics of marijuana. But one huge thing that came out of this, and it's the strongest afterthought I've had after doing this series, is that there's a real problem here with the extremely high levels of THC that is in today's marijuana. I mean, this is not, you know, not to sound flippant, but this is not your granddad's reefer. This is not the levels of THC now in marijuana due to improved soil conditions, genetic strains of marijuana, and then the use of THC oils and concentrates. You know, it's up to 90% in terms of just the dry weight of marijuana compared to, say, 10, 12, 20% THC in a typical joint. It's much, much higher. Kids are doing things now, for instance, called dabbing, where, say, a joint has 10, 12 milligrams. These are up to 90. And there are no studies, very few studies of marijuana joints or marijuana products over, say, 12, 15, 20 milligrams. So we have no idea what this type of marijuana potency can do to the human brain. We do know that the younger the brain, the more damage THC can do to that. So, you know, we're kind of rushing as a nation into this, unleashing, you know, and allowing access to even young children. And when I say access to young children, there are THC edibles that are being made in the shape of gummy bears and lollipops and colorful sodas. And so we really need to pump the brakes, really slow down and think about the controls we need to put in place, and maybe do a little more research, right? A wise man looks well to his going, the good book says. And slow down and be very careful and look at the consequences of what, you know, we're doing, what we're letting loose on the streets, if you will.
Well, I want to read to you a little bit from your article here that has a little bit of I think a lot of the major concerns about the marijuana laws going around the country. Teenage abuse is the most worrisome. 17% of adolescent users turn into addicts, and 3/4 of adolescent admissions to publicly funded addiction treatment centers are marijuana related. One study of a Colorado Children's Hospital found that cannabis-related emergency room admission for youth ages 13 to 21 quadrupled between 2005 and 2014, the year the state legalized marijuana for recreational use. So are we seeing, is that just in one state, or are we seeing that in other states that have also legalized marijuana?
You know, that I don't know. That, from my understanding, that was based on a group called SMART, and they're a very actually sensible lobbying group who they're basically saying the same thing, slow down. And those stats were taken from a campaign that they were conducting in Colorado when Colorado was looking at legalizing marijuana for adult purposes, recreational purposes. So those stats are all based in Colorado, to the best of my understanding.
Let's go to Matthew, who's calling from Emerson, New Jersey, on the independent line. Matthew, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, and thank you, gentlemen. I have some facts that I would like the guest to please address. Fact number one, in many states which have legalized recreational marijuana use, like Colorado, traffic accident deaths have doubled, with obviously many more serious injuries. That's a fact. Fact number two, drug abuse and addiction have risen, And as you mentioned, sir, earlier, children are being admitted to hospitals from eating high-potency THC-infused candy like gummy bears. Fact number 3, the expected tax revenues in Colorado have not materialized because they've been offset by increased legal costs and other costs from the increased traffic deaths and accidents, increased crime, increased homelessness, and increased drug addiction. Facts, gentlemen, which often the mainstream media does not report. And I can tell you in New Jersey, the New Jersey State Police are against legalizing recreational for these reasons. We're not talking medicinal. That's a separate subject. For these reasons, which are not publicized very often. Thank you very much if you could address these.
Yeah, those are actually very good points, and that needs to be made. Even if the revenue promises are made and realized, they have to be set off for the incredible social costs that come with this. And one really big concern that's emerging here is that because of the high THC levels here, the potent marijuana that's out there now really does rise to the level of a new opiate epidemic. In fact, the Netherlands now, they're now considering classifying marijuana with THC levels of 15% and higher in the same level of as LSD and heroin, and treating them as that addictive. So we're actually maybe creating another opiate epidemic with a new marijuana, if you will, and the social costs of that are going to far gain the so-called revenue, the panacea that the marijuana revenue is supposed to create. So again, wise man looks well to his going, and he counts all the costs before we rush. Again, no pun intended, before we rush into things, and that is also the other big theme that came to us looking into this matter in this series, was that we really are, and again, no pun intended here, but we're rushing into this. We're really rushing into this because we're intoxicated as a nation by the lure of all this revenue money, this tax revenue, and we're not really considering all the social cost. And Marvin Olasky, who's my editor, he wrote the last piece, and he used this great metaphor. It's like a legal locomotive that's speeding down the tracks, and yet there's kids playing on the tracks, playing hopscotch on the tracks, and they're in danger. And so, not to sound like an alarmist, but we really need to be a little more cautious in our proceedings with this.
Well, this was something I hadn't thought about until I read your series. Everyone has the stereotype of the marijuana, people smoking marijuana, but you write in this article, the coming pot battle may be between vapings versus edibles, with smoking left far behind. The Pro-Pot Marijuana Policy Project says vaping can deliver the drug with a potency of up to 16 times higher than smoking the bud. So it seems like it's the vaping and the edibles that looks to be the future of recreational marijuana, not smoking as it was in the past.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, I think that's pretty much a done deal as well. A Deloitte study done last year said that I think it was 5 out of 6 Americans would choose to ingest marijuana through edibles. And remember, edibles includes drinkables, and that's the way that marijuana, and I'm just going to call it THC consumption, is going to be done, is through edibles and most likely drinkables. And it's going to be normalized because you're going to see it used in familiar products. You remember Coca-Cola just announced in September that they're going to explore a CBD-based beverage. So you're going to see it in iced tea, you're going to see it in smoothies, in frappuccinos, you're going to see it in sports drinks. There's even a company that's created THC concentrated drops that has, I believe it's 15 milligrams of THC that'll get you high within 5 minutes, and it'll last for 90 minutes. And then it's being billed as the new beer, that it gets you high, gives you an intoxication, but with no calories and no hangover. So it's a far cry from this Jeff Spicoli type character sucking on a doobie, and you don't have the armpit or skunk odor, you don't have the dry cough, you know, that whole social stigma is gone. It's going to be much more readily socially acceptable because the form in which it comes is already acceptable. Does that make sense?
Right. Let's let Ryan, who is calling from El Dorado, Kansas, on the Democratic line, join the conversation. Ryan, good morning.
Good morning, please, man. It's actually Brian. But anyway, I just wanted to counter a couple of points.
So Ryan, before you go any further, you're coming in and out on us. Can you get a little closer to your phone?
Oh gosh, let me try. Okay, well, speakerphone works. Can I try that?
Okay, Ryan, we think
Can you
we
hear me
lost.
now?
I think we lost him. Let's go to Robert, who's calling from Parker City, Indiana, on the Democratic line. Robert, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Go ahead.
I said, good morning, sir.
Good morning. Go ahead.
Good morning.
I am sorry. I'm 75 years old, and I never smoked any dope, and I never got drunk. And I want to say that you can put any nice word or nice name on it, but it's still dope. And all you got to do is add a little liquor to it, and you have the same potential if it was the strongest marijuana. Back to the prior phone calls for the president, I'm a Democrat. I've been a Democrat my whole life, and I support the law.
All right, let's keep going. Let's go to David, who's calling from Grand Rapids, Michigan, on the Independent line. David, good morning.
Hey, good morning, everybody. So we got to go back to Richard Nixon when he, I don't know what you would say, invented the DEA. Now, my question is, there wasn't no laws passed, correct, as far as to make the DEA into existence. So, saying that, why do we have to pass laws to make marijuana legal on the federal level? I mean, there was really no law ever passed saying that marijuana was illegal on the federal level, correct? I'll listen.
Sure. Yeah. My understanding is it's made illegal because the DEA has placed marijuana on its Schedule 1 of controlled substances in the Federal Drug Act. So it's Schedule 1, which means it has no medical value, and because of the effect the drug has on the human body. So what everybody's been lobbying for since the early 70s, groups like NORML was the first group that lobbied for this, is to have a federal law passed to remove it from the Schedule 1 category. So that's what all the hubbub is about on the federal level for legislation.
Let's go to Roger, who's calling from Virginia Beach, Virginia, on the Democratic line. Roger, good morning.
Morning, Jesse. How you doing?
Just fine. Go ahead.
All right. Yeah, and thanks, C-SPAN, and the impartiality. Look, I'm just curious about the numbers in Canada, how they're doing in terms of revenue, and if there's a correlation between, things like accidents, crime. What are the levels for that, too?
Yeah, that was outside the scope of my my articles. They just passed this in October, and it's really going to take some time to implement it. So I'm not even sure if Canada has released any figures yet. It's really kind of too soon to tell. But that is something I'd like to research. That's a good question.
Let's go with Peter, who's calling from Novi, Michigan, on the Republican line. Peter, good morning.
Good morning. That's Novi, Michigan, by the way.
Novi, Michigan. Okay, gotcha. Go ahead with your question.
I've called in a few times in the past, usually as an independent. I'm leaning more towards I'm a Republican now, by the way the world's going and by the way everyone is. I've been smoking weed for 40 years. My friends, even longer than that. And let me tell you, the weed we smoked 40 years ago was 20 times as good as you can get.
Oh, okay. One of the things that you talked about in one of your articles is the increased potency of marijuana that's found today. What have you found on that issue?
Yeah, again, it's something I mentioned earlier. There's just there's been more better genetic engineering, better enhanced soil. The lighting systems, they improve it. Then it's the delivery systems. For instance, vaping, as you mentioned earlier, vaping it is, first of all, they use oil concentrates. They can be up to 80% more potent, contain 80% more THC, so it's a THC concentrate. Then the burn rate with the combustibles, it doesn't burn off as much THC when it's consumed. And so, for instance, that last gentleman may have been talking about just smoking the flower, the bud. That has, one of the factors is with the burn rate, it doesn't burn off, it burns off more THC as it burns. So there's a lot of kind of sliding scale factors that determine how much THC gets in your system. And again, kids are doing a thing called dabbing I mentioned earlier. That's where the THC can be in a form of a wax or a resin, where they use a glass straw to ingest it in vapor form, and that can be up to 90% pure THC. So it's just much more potent than what traditional reefer of old, if that makes sense.
Well, we'd like to thank Jim Long of World Magazine for his 5-part series and for being here today. If you want to read his 5-part series, go to World Magazine. Jim, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, sir. It was a pleasure.
Coming up.
Hi, everyone. My name's Mike. I'm the creator of Mox News. And for the last 15 years, I have been telling you that as long as I have the support of the community that I serve, Mox News will post videos forever. And that's the truth. As long as I have your support, no one could ever make me stop. Unfortunately, currently, less than 1/2 of 1/10 of 1% of Mox News viewers ever donate, tip, or contribute anything back. Again, let me make that really clear. Much less than 1/2 of 1/10 of 1% ever give anything back. And to those of you who have donated to Mox News, I want to thank you so much, because it's because of your generosity that we have been able to bring attention to important videos that millions and millions of eyes would have never seen. And I think that that's an amazing thing that we've been able to make happen together. And I can't thank you enough for helping me make that happen. So it's not too late. If you'd like to see Mox News covering the 2020 presidential election, if you can't imagine the 2020 presidential election without Mox News, please, there's still time. You can make a difference. It's easy to make a contribution, donation, or tip. You can go to moxnews.com, or in the text body of this video, there are clickable links to the Patreon page or to the PayPal page. And again, it should take less than 2 minutes to make a donation, and your donation can make a big difference. So I thank you all. Stay cool. One of these days this war is going to end, and it would be awesome if Mox News could be there to celebrate that day with you.